Welcome to The Courage Effect. I'm Suzanne Weller, and this is a show about growth and unleashing what's possible. You will hear inspiring stories about what courage looks like, how we navigate what's getting in our way, and the opportunities that surface when we choose courage over comfort. Let's get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Courage Effect. I am really excited for the conversation that I'm going to be having today with my guest, because my guest is somebody that I met when I started my coaching journey, when I decided that I wanted to become a certified coach. And Michael is somebody that was in that process with me, and it's been a joy to know him. And I'm really looking forward to this conversation today for you to get to know him as well. Michael Hudson is our guest. So let me tell you about Michael. He serves as the CEO at the Hudson Institute of Coaching, one of the world's premier coach training and corporate coaching organizations. Michael has a master's degree in organizational psychology from INSEAD and spent 10 years of his career living and working in Southeast Asia and East Africa, where he helped build what is now Africa's largest direct service NGO. Michael also works as a coach, primarily partnering with startup founders and social entrepreneurs. He believes coaching is needed in our world today more than ever before and is dedicated to using it to create a more purpose-driven world. I could not agree with those statements more. Michael, welcome to The Courage Effect.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you for being here. So one of the things that has really most impressed me about you is your storytelling. You have all of these fantastic experiences, and you have such a desire to seek out experiences. And you have this ability to sort of move beyond your current situation and explore new places and people and challenges. So I'd love to start our conversation with you speaking to some of those earlier experiences and how they impacted you through the lens of courage.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne. I majored in my undergrad. I majored in anthropology, and I was studying really what interested me in that was learning about how different people around the world lived and how they organized themselves in their communities and traditions. And by the time I got to the end of the 4 years of studying that, I was ready to just go somewhere. I wanted to get out of the classroom and I wanted to just go experience something. And as a 22-year-old, I could do that. I was lucky enough and in a situation where I could take that risk. And so what I ended up doing was getting a job in rural Vietnam, so about 5.5 hours by bus south of Ho Chi Minh City, in a town called Long Xuyen. The job was at a public university in the Research Center for Rural Development, and I got offered the job as a researcher there, rural development researcher. I knew very little about Vietnam, and I knew even less about this university or really exactly what was happening in this research center. And I took a risk on that. And, in considering this conversation that I was going to have with you, I've thought about that from a perspective of courage. And I think there's sort of the naive courage that a young person can have, right? Of I'm going to go do something because I have no idea what it is over there. And I want to know what the experience is. I want to expose myself to new things so that I have the chance to grow and learn and all of that. And I think that's what it was about for me at that time, was a hunger for exposure to new things. So almost like a hope that there's more out there that I haven't found yet. And I wanted to go on an adventure to find some of those things. And an adventure it turned out to be over there. So I showed up there, and on the first day, the person running that university said, actually, we don't anymore need a researcher, a rural development researcher. What we need is an English teacher. Would you be open to doing that? And I said, well, no, I'm not an English teacher. I don't know how to do that. And also, it's not what I want to do. I came here to do rural development research. And there was some courage that came out there in that situation where I had to sort of access all of my stubbornness. And this is a whole different conversation, but it turns out I have plenty of that. And to kind of stand up for what was important to me at that point, which was I want to be a part of this research center and I want to learn how to do rural development research. I want to get out into communities. And so they let me do that. And I got to do that. And I was um, one foreigner in a team of Vietnamese researchers. And it was about 2 years of just every single day trying to figure out what was going on in that office with that team, but actually in the entire community, how to get lunch, how to order coffee, how to find an apartment to live in, how to get a driver's license. Every single thing was an adventure. And I loved that. I think that it was formative for me in part because I was very young, but also because some of these lessons that you learn at that stage are things that can stick with you for your entire life. Like, this idea that it's okay to be making it up as you go. It's okay to be unsure of everything, but figure out enough so that you can take the next step forward. And so I think a lot of those lessons that I did learn as a 22-year-old are things that I still kind of lean on, even unconsciously today.
Was it intimidating for you?
Yeah. Yeah. So about 6 months in, I thought maybe it's not going to work actually. So I was trying to integrate myself into the work, and actually I found that they didn't really know how to fit me in, and I didn't know how to fit in either. And so I wasn't doing a lot in the first 6 months, to be totally honest. I would show up and I'd edit some reports, and I wasn't doing a lot of research. And I thought, wow, maybe this isn't working. And I started hearing stories of people saying, "Oh yeah, so and so came here and then they left early." Because and so I started to think, well, maybe that's going to be me. Like, am I going to leave early if I can't figure out how to make it work? And the stubbornness maybe served me in that situation where I said, no, I'm going to figure out how to make it work. And I really uh, doubled down, and especially on language, because language was a huge part of the barrier that made it hard to operate there.
Yeah.
And that, as I started to make progress on language, it unlocked a lot on the culture side that really helped me. But still, I'm a total novice at all of that stuff. Um, but yeah, it was intimidating, and it would have, I think there's the instinct to go back to something familiar.
Yeah.
Um, because it's not just a moment, it's like waking up to that every single day. It's quite hard to be a stranger in somebody else's place.
Yeah, and it's like the courage of being an outsider, of going and staying. I think that is the thing. It's not just doing the visit, because so many of us are tourists in that way, right? We go and then we're sort of out the door. So it was your stubbornness that kept you? What else, when you hit that 6 month point, kept you motivated?
The stubbornness helps, but yeah, it's not enough on its own. So I think I was applying my old ideas, like say like the skills that I had in college that got me through college.
Mhm.
So like working hard and studying and these sorts of things, like sort of analytical skills. Uh, I naturally started to apply those in Long Xuan, and it didn't really help me very much. So like on language acquisition, for example, I made like 200 flashcards of different words in Vietnamese. And I'm not sure if you've heard Vietnamese before, but it's quite difficult if you don't know how to pronounce it. It doesn't
Oh
really matter
yeah.
if you've like memorized the flashcards. You won't necessarily be able to say those words or notice them when they're being spoken. And so I wasn't really learning language. Like I wasn't making any progress, even though I was memorizing all these words. And it actually was a conversation with a guy who had been there for quite a bit longer, who had really integrated well into that community, and he spoke quite good Vietnamese. And he had a conversation with me over coffee. We would have coffee over lunch periodically, and he said, "What are you nervous about? Like, what? Why? It seems like you're worried about embarrassing yourself," is what he said to me. And I hadn't realized that, but it really hit home. He was right. So to speak Vietnamese and to really kind of like let myself go into that culture was I had to let go of a part of myself, it felt like, I think, to do that. And that was pretty scary. And so, but I think it really kind of cut to my core when he said that. And it gave me license to test that. And then I kind of let go of the flashcards and I started spending time over meals with people and just trying to say things and seeing what happened. And lo and behold, people did not freak out when I tried things, and I didn't freak out. It everything was okay, and it was actually exciting and generative and engaging, and that's where the action was. So it was like finding a different part of myself, a different mode of operating with people
Yeah.
than I had previously known.
I talk about holding up the mirror. I mean, I love having somebody say that to you. And I mean, what's really resonating with me is people being generous. Like we sort of underestimate the generosity of people when we're in those situations. Like, I have a feeling we're both hyperachievers, right? So we're just like, I got this, I can do it. It's like it's okay to not know sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's maybe the from a courage lens, that's what was going on, was like developing the courage to be okay not knowing.
Yeah.
Not knowing everything that's going on, not knowing where I'm headed, not knowing what's going to come out of it, but instead just kind of being there and enjoying it and having fun and giving back in the moments where I could. Um, that was hard, right? That's like letting go of like ego to a certain degree
Mhm.
in order to be present. And for a 22-year-old, that maybe for anybody, that's quite a hard thing to do, but especially for a 22-year-old.
Yes. Well, and it is sort of an interesting combination of naivete. I think that, when you're younger, it's almost like you have less to lose. So I feel like risk is maybe a little bit easier for us to jump into as opposed to, I mean, you're a father. So it's like there's all of these we get more we just have more at risk, I think, when we get older. So sometimes it can be harder to jump in.
Right. Yeah. There are certain, although I was less developed in certain ways as a young person, there is license to access more courage in certain ways, or to take risks in ways that are really important, and they're harder now. There's more on the line now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're going to cut to a quick break, but I'd love to come back to talk because then you went to Kenya. So I'd love to hear about how you actually transitioned into that and then the larger impressions that that's had on your professional and your personal life. So we will be right back. You're listening to The Courage Effect. Stay tuned. Courage takes on many forms. I know from personal experience that one of the most courageous things we can do is to recognize when we need help and seek out support. If you're going through a hard time, feeling like something is interfering with your happiness or the ability to achieve your goals, therapy can give you tools to approach your life in a very different way. And that's why I'm excited to tell you about today's sponsor, BetterHelp. BetterHelp's mission is to make therapy more affordable and accessible. It's an online platform where you can be matched with a professional therapist in as little as a few days. For more information and to get matched with a therapist, go to BetterHelp, that's HELP.com/courage. Visiting this link both supports this show and gets you 10% off your first month of BetterHelp. So if you're struggling, consider online therapy with BetterHelp. Welcome back to The Courage Effect. This is Suzanne, and my guest today is Michael Hudson. So, Michael, we were talking about an early experience of you after college, moving to rural Vietnam and not necessarily sure if it was going to work, but staying it out and getting some unpredicted coaching from a friend during that period over coffee.
Right.
And then you stayed on and you had a great experience. You got into the flow, but I know that after that you went to Kenya.
In Vietnam, I ended up spending most of my time studying microfinance programs in southern Vietnam, um, and so then when I was looking for a next opportunity, I was interested in getting involved in implementation microfinance, and so I found a startup in rural Kenya, in western Kenya, near the Ugandan border, in a little town called Bungoma, that was doing a non-traditional microfinance business model. So instead of lending cash, they were lending farm inputs, seed and fertilizer to smallholder farmers, training them on how to use it with the goal of increasing their yields. And then farmers would pay back after harvest. Really cool idea. And solved multiple problems that farmers were facing simultaneously. But it was a scrappy little startup that I joined. I think it was probably a few hundred people when I joined that organization. And um, I knew when I joined the group that I was really lucky, that I had found a really smart, uh, passionate, motivated group of people. And so I knew I was just lucky to be a part of that group. But I didn't really know how lucky because we were fumbling around and making things up. I would spend my days jumping in the truck and going out and talking to farmers, asking them, "Hey, what do you value? What do you need? What would help?" And then coming back and trying to design products that would work for them, and then running experiments with farmers and rinse and repeat. But we were really just figuring it out, what would work. But over the course of about 7 years, we grew from a few hundred people to about 7,000 people in
Wow.
that organization operating across sub-Saharan Africa. And so it really became a test of leadership to me. A young person who joined a startup. I was passionate about jumping in the pickup truck and talking to farmers, but after about 7 years, I wasn't doing that anymore. I was leading groups, leading teams, um, creating a lot of slide decks. And my work was about my impact was defined by my ability to work through others. And that was not the skill set that I started with. And so I had to grow and change the way I operate in a whole host of ways if I wanted to succeed in a leadership role in a different organization. So, yeah, that was a really fantastic experience for me. And I think, we built something that was making a difference in the world, which I care a lot about. And that organization is still thriving today, One Acre Fund.
That's fantastic. It's
Yeah.
a great story.
Yeah.
Well, and what's really resonating for me too is that you almost went on a listening tour, right? It was like you started off just by not knowing and really wanting to know more and to learn from who was around you. And you spoke in the first half of the show about the courage of not knowing.
Mm.
So, what role does that play in your life now?
So I currently run my family business, founded by my father and mother in 1986. And it's easier to see at this age how much I don't know. It's easier to see in my daily life than it was when I was younger. It's like the humility of being a little bit older feels more present.
Mhm.
And so I'm running this family business, and as you already mentioned earlier, I'm an achiever. I like to build things. I like to grow. I like big goals, all of that stuff. And I'm running a family business that's been around for nearly 40 years. And as you know, I mean, we have a great organization and a great set of services and a great brand and community and all of these things. And so there's a certain tension, a really strong tension between tradition and the past and disruption and the future. And so I think that Faulkner said, um, we have to have the courage to lose the shore if we're going to find a new horizon. It's possible I'm butchering his quote a little bit. But I think that's kind of what I'm doing. So the tradition is the shore. And I can't lose it completely, right? I have to keep it in sight actually in my role, and I have to know what parts of that have been critical to our success. But then I have to have the courage to disrupt as well, to say, well, actually, here are all of the things that need to change and evolve based on our changing world, based on new research, based on what
Yeah.
we think might be possible. And I have to have the courage to play some bets and take some risks on those things, even when they are in tension with tradition. And anytime we change anything, big or small, it upsets the system, right? Doesn't feel good. It triggers all sorts of things in people, strong feelings in people, fear. And so my role, there's a professor at INSEAD where I studied who said that leadership is an argument with tradition. It's a constant process of interfacing and making meaning from tradition, and then figuring out, how much can we change? How much change can we tolerate relative to that tradition, or how much change should we engage in? And so I think that argument with tradition is something that I'm in, and I'm really lucky that we have tradition and have
Yeah.
legacy that is so important. that we have to double down on in a lot of cases. And yet it's not possible to just lean on it and count on it and become complacent. So anyway, I think that takes a lot of courage to show up and do that, to try to differentiate and then to figure out where to take risks.
Yes, and I love that leadership is an argument with tradition. That is so so true. I mean, just the various tensions there, and I think about the fact of you stepped into the CEO role during the pandemic, and I was so impressed with all of the massive pivots that Hudson had to do during that time because of it was an in-person program, then going to all virtual, and then as you've changed it over time, now you're doing both virtual and in person, and new teams and also with it being a family business, there's so many other dynamics that come into play there. So yes, I would imagine you've been steeped in all of these innovation tradition polarities for the past few years quite deeply.
Yeah, it has been an unusual time to step into that role. I keep waiting for when the normal times are going to come, but I'm starting to think it's not going to happen.
I think this is the new normal or the
Right.
new abnormal. I'm curious for you because you also are partnering with other CEOs and other leaders of organizations. Are these similar trends that you're seeing with them?
I think that feeling that I have, the feeling that we don't know what the world is going to be, what's going to be possible, what's going to be needed in 5 years. I think that is a universal for people who are being honest, right? Like it feels safer to not feel that way, but I think if we just really take a look, leaders feel that way right now, myself included. I think maybe 10 years ago, we had 10-year plans. Organizations had 10-year plans, right? It was like a Gantt chart. Here, where do you want to be? Where are you right now? And then what do
Yeah.
you need to do each year to get there? And it sort of assumed that we operated within a closed system, predictable system, and we could be smart and execute on our smart ideas in order to get to a different. I don't think that anybody is doing 10-year plans now. I'm not doing them.
Yep.
And my clients are not doing them. It's like, even a 3-year plan seems a little bit overly ambitious in a lot of ways. And so I think that what might have felt like, oh, let's take a leap to accept that we don't know what's going on. I think now it's just kind of starting to wash over us a little bit. We cannot ignore it and we can't really pretend. And so, yeah, I think that theme is feeling universal to me. And I think that it changes what leaders need, right? We can't just be smart. We can't have good Gantt charts. We can't just have good OKRs and all, like those are like
Yes.
table stakes. We need that stuff, but how do we find the capacity to discover what we don't know and what our organizations don't know? That I think is what is really asked of us right now,
Yeah.
needed from us right now. And it's we don't really get trained in that. Most people don't get trained in that. It's quite hard.
You're making me think about, I mean, AI is obviously the topic that everybody's been talking about for the
Mhm.
last year, especially. And you
Mhm.
you have brought that in head on because that is something that obviously is going to impact coaching and already is. So I'm curious for you if there's any quick capture of something that you'd like to say about that.
Yeah, I think technology has already started to shift what's possible with coaching, and it will be maybe the most important innovation in coaching in the next 5 years or so. We really believe in the AI coach companion, the co-pilot approach. So we believe that there's something so important about the human relationship and human connection in this work. It's not necessary for everything, but in this work, we think it's so important. And yet, AI technology, they bring strengths that humans don't have. They can be always present. They can distill huge amounts of information. And so by partnering with those strengths, coaches can be a lot stronger. They can reach more people. And so, where I am disappointed in coaching is that 99.9% of people in the world do not get to benefit from it. I don't like that. I believe that coaching helps, and that's not good enough. And so I think technology maybe is part of the answer around helping more people benefit from the magic of coaching.
Yeah, the democratization of coaching. What's really sitting with me is when you talk about leaders really needing to be honest with ourselves, and that's just us as human beings. So I'm curious for you, what helps you to be honest with yourself?
It's not easy, right? Because well, so I think being honest with what I mean when I say that is seeing beyond our patterns, seeing beyond our assumptions, and figuring out what might really be happening, right? Which perhaps is something that is never totally possible. But um, I think when there's a big external disruption, it's a lot easier to be honest with ourselves because we get to see the reality that we don't control everything. So, COVID is a big example of this, right? When everything shut down, and, as you were saying earlier, when we had to take our business from completely in person to completely virtual, we had no idea how to do that. We did not want to do that. We never would have chosen to do that. And yet we had to do it. We felt that we had to do it. And so, to be honest with ourselves was to say, look, we don't get to do this the way that we think we want to do it. And we just have to change. We just have to change. And actually, we benefited so much from that change. We learned so many things that we still use and we will continue to use into the future. So it was really helpful, by the way. But we were not going to get there easily or quickly on our own. It was an external disruption that helped us see that. And we're an organization that like works in the space of change, right? So it's quite humbling to experience that, right? Nobody is exempt from this sort of thing. But I think that's an example of being honest, like what change could you make to improve things? How do you need to adapt to your situation? And I think external stuff, going back to the Vietnam experience, that was like one big disruption for me, right? A daily disruption. And so that put me in a conversation with myself that felt very true to my experience at that point in time. On the other hand, on the other side of it is habituation, just operating in our patterns, going to the office, you drive home, you don't remember exactly what route you took home because you're so used to it and you just do that every single day and it just happens, autopilot. And so honesty comes from, for me, breaking out of habituation.
Mm, I love that. And it's and in my head, I'm going back to also the flashcard story because the idea of flashcards will only teach you so much. There's only so many words that are on those flashcards. You never know it's like, last year I studied Spanish in an app and then I went to Mexico and I was like stumbling over myself. It's just there's a certain amount of doing it in the environment that changes everything.
Right.
And work is the same.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. And so pushing off from the shore a little bit, right?
Yeah.
Losing sight of the shore a little bit. It's maybe the only way to start to get honest about what you really have. Um, when times are really good, like in business, for example, when times are really good, I think that you assume you know why they're good. Why you're succeeding. You think you know. And then when things are not going well, you really find out. You really find out what things am I spending time on that are moving the needle, and and then what's all that other stuff that I thought was useful that is maybe having very little impact on my success. And so that's a disruption, right? That not a welcome one, not one that we would sign up for, but we learn a lot from it if we can pay attention.
If we could pay attention. Yes. It's such a true thing is that we don't tend to take inventory on what's going on when things are going well. We tend to go into that mode of something's wrong, I need to fix it, as opposed to maybe being proactive and doing some almost like pre-mortem, right? Like to get an idea of what might go wrong.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I think it takes me to the burning platform thing. Like, right, the classic OD idea that we're only going to change if the platform is on fire, right? We're not going to choose to change because when you change, you have to let go of a part of yourself. If you become something different, you have to take a look at your identity and say, well, I'm going to let go of this part of myself, part of my organization that has been important to me.
Yeah.
And there's a loss, there's a loss and there's pain in that. And so we don't easily sign up for it. And maybe that's where disruption and, simple stuff taking a different path to work in the morning. It can help break us out of that habituation and find a little bit of openness to change.
Yes. Yeah. And I love pushing away from the shore. What are the ways that we can do to do that? And you're making me also think about, coaching for me. It was one of those things where I call my coaching certification my excavation, because it really was about, I had to dig out these are the parts of my identity that really aren't serving me anymore. I need to let them go. Maybe I'm not ready to, but I need to actually process this. And then in turn, respecting that we're doing that for our clients, for the people that we're partnering with.
Right. Yeah, there really is a parallel process, right? Developing oneself as a coach and then the work that we do with our clients. Developing awareness. It's a big part of it.
Yeah, very much so. All right. Well, I could go on forever, but we're going to leave it at this. So such a joy, Michael. Such a great conversation. I really respect the larger storytelling and everything that you're doing and how you're bringing that into your experience now and helping to bring that to more people on a greater scale. So thank you again for being here.
Thank you, Suzanne. Such a pleasure to spend this time with you. Thanks for inviting me.
You too. Keep doing your amazing work, and I'm grateful to have you in my universe. So thank you. And thank you to everybody for listening. Take care. Stay courageous. The Courage Effect is brought to you by Weller Collaboration. We partner with individuals, teams, and organizations to enhance leadership, increase agility, and build effective teams. More information about us is available via the links in our show notes. Please spread the word about the Courage Effect. Rate and review your favorite episodes on iTunes or your favorite podcast platform. Share with your colleagues, family, and anyone in your universe who might be inspired by a good dose of courage. If you have feedback or stories to share about the show or would like to apply to be a guest, please contact us via our website. Benny Mathers is our producer. Dave Nelson composed our theme music. Alex Sandyforth is our administrative maven, and I'm your host, Suzanne Weller.